make it. If you all wouldn't mind, if you would like to say hello in the chat, please feel free to do that. And when you do, please let us know what state you're from. If you're a Lifespan Respite Care Program lead, or from a state respite coalition, or from another agency and organization, that's always very helpful to know. I just want to quickly go over what the agenda is for today's meeting. We're going to start out by welcoming back Laura Mauldin with Applied Self-Direction, who prepared the Readiness Assessment Tool for Self-Directed Respite Voucher Programs that we released a couple of months ago, and you all should have access to, but she's here to answer any questions you might have about the tool. And then we'll move on to our main presentation and discussion around equity in access to services from our wonderful colleagues at Lifespan Respite Washington. And we will be breaking out into small discussion groups during that presentation. Before we get officially started, as always, I have a few announcements and reminders. I want to remind all of you who are Lifespan Respite grantees and partners that we have our learning collaborative on implementing the national strategy. We're meeting next week, June 15th from 2 to 3:30 p.m. Eastern Time. If you are a grantee or partner, you should have received the agenda from Arch this week. And that meeting we're really going to be dedicated to hearing from you. And we sent some questions in advance to help frame the discussion. And I think we'll be most productive if you have time, if you could review those questions in advance and come prepared to share information about your state lifespan respite activities and how they align with the strategy. I think that would be really wonderful. If you didn't receive the agenda and the discussion guide, please let me know in the chat, and I'll be sure to make sure you get a copy of that. Secondly, I wanted to mention that we did develop some new web pages on the new Arch website that are specifically dedicated to respite vouchers. You may all know that we already have a page that, of course, includes all the presentations and resources that are related to these learning collaborative meetings. And we also have a page with state lifespan respite voucher tools to share the tools that states have so generously shared with us. But we added a page that has general information about respite vouchers and how to access all the resources, what they are and how do you apply for them if you're a family caregiver or someone working with a family caregiver. And the second link, that page links to a US map that will help caregivers and others connect to the contact information about how to apply for lifespan respite and a few other voucher programs in your state. We did not include all of the Medicaid home and community-based waiver programs on this particular map that might provide respite vouchers or self-directed respite. We have all that information on another map around the Medicaid waivers. And the map also doesn't include all of the funding streams in your state that might fund vouchers. It really is focused on the lifespan respite grant funded vouchers and a few other voucher programs that are state funded. So if you have time, if you want to look over that map, and if you have anything you want to add or correct to that map, please let me know that as well. And then finally, I did send this around also, but in case you missed it, we did not have an originally scheduled respite voucher learning collaborative in April because of everything that was going on with grant writing and other conflicts. But I did want to let you know that we did produce a wonderful webinar during April. Again, in our great partnership with Applied Self-Direction, we were able to provide a virtual webinar presentation on self-direction in respite voucher programs. And I was joined by Lisa Schneider from the Respite Care Association of Wisconsin and Aida Stevens from Oklahoma in presenting on their particular wonderful models of voucher and related programs. And we have that recorded webinar on the website, and I provided a link to that site as well. So if you haven't listened to that webinar yet, and you really want to learn about some other model voucher programs, that's a great opportunity to do that. And I'll put the link to these slides and the links that are referred to in this slide directly in the chat, so you can access them a little more easily. Finally, we're going to start off with Laura Mauldin. As you know, last fall, ARCH released the Self-Directed Respite Voucher Guide that was prepared for us by Applied Self-Direction. It's really a detailed step-by-step guide to implementing a successful respite voucher program, and it has in-depth case studies from several states in the Lifespan Respite Network, including Washington State. And then, inspired by a lot of the work that the New York Lifespan grantee was doing around expanding voucher programs to their area agencies on aging, we asked Applied Self-Direction to do something similar to what New York was doing, and that was to develop a complement to the voucher guide, and that is this Readiness Self-Assessment Tool that you've heard Laura speak to us about before, and so many of you provided really valuable input on the tool. So she's here with us today to come back and present the tool again, a broad overview, and then give you an opportunity, if you've started to use the tool or you're thinking about using the tool and you have any questions about it, that she would give us a few minutes today to answer those questions and make herself available. So Laura, thank you so much. Welcome back. And again, thank you for taking the time to check in with us on this effort, and I'll turn it over to you.
Great. Nice to see everyone again. And thanks, Jill. It's been a pleasure to work on this project with so many wonderful people, really doing a lot of amazing work. I'm going to start. I'm going to share the link, and a lot of the links Jill shared already in the presentation, but this is the link. And with the respite voucher programs, I'm going to share my screen too. So we'll do a little bit of both. So I'm going to, let's see. There's that. Wonder if I can, I'm trying to do more than one share at a time, and I don't know if that's going to work. So can you can see here's the web page with the respite voucher programs. Can you see that now? Yes. Okay. Yes. So to access the tool, it's down at the bottom. And there's two versions. The first is in Excel, and then the second is in PDF. And we have both just because the PDF is set up so that you can print it if you need to. And I'm just going to change my sharing because I want to show you the tool now. So here's the tool. Can you see the tool? Somebody gave me a thumbs up last time, so I'm hoping that you can see it.
I don't see the tool.
You don't see the tool? Okay. Let's try that again. Here's the tool.
Now we see it. Yeah.
Okay, great. Okay, so here's the tool. So this is the Excel version. And the first page is the instructions, and it gives you an overview. And it also includes a link to the respite voucher guide. And so the way that this works is the blue lines are program components, and we've included a voucher guide page number in case you're looking at the tool and you want a little bit more information or some context. There's the respite voucher guide in there, the number to the page in the respite voucher guide. Any items that are in gray, so we have blue lines are the program components, items in gray are going to be best practices to consider, right, before your program launches. They might not be relevant for your specific program, but what this tool tried to do is incorporate, if I know that a lot of you were involved in providing feedback, and this isn't the first time you've seen it, but we tried to include a lot of different ideas because it's easier to see one and then decide that it's not relevant than never have it presented. So that's why you'll see a lot of different ideas in here. We have a notes section to track information, so you can type in whatever you think is going to be relevant for your program. And then at the end, a status. So this is a quick version of for you to track information as you're going down through it. So we have green being complete, yellow being in progress, pink being need to address, and then gray being not applicable. And if you enter quickly an X, an I, a question mark, or an NA, you will get those colors. So let's look at the tool itself. So as I said, those summary items, the X, I, question mark, or NA, it's going to summarize right at the top. So if you've gone through and you've done the work to look at every single item, you can quickly see how many you have to address in each category. So we have, if we look at the top, we have our program design element, and then our considerations. So the first line is that task force, and then our status. So we have our drop down. You can add an item, or you can even just type it in and it will change the color. And then you can see the top, it summarizes. So we have a lot of different categories, really starting at the beginning, determining the needs of the family caregiver and how they can be addressed. So we have a lot of different items here. We have some examples, and then we get down into funding streams, so different funding sources, the types of funding sources, how they've been established, any reporting requirements for the funding sources, the IRS reporting requirements that might be attached to the funding sources that are separate from the reporting requirements for the funding sources themselves. I'm continuing to go down, really thinking about if you want to use a fiscal agent or a financial management services entity, looking at your administrative roles. And when I worked with this group in the past, all of you said that, hey, when we're doing these programs, a lot of time gets bogged down into those administrative roles and not really understanding it. So you'll notice that administrative roles category is it's very broad. And so we tried to come up with all the different elements that you could include in various administrative roles. So it is fairly lengthy, but that's purposeful, right? So it might have a couple different roles up here. And when we look in the breakdown of the program, it's not quite as detailed because we wanted to think about who's doing which role. So then we move on to the factors that influence enrollment. And I have to say, especially in every category, I got such great feedback from all of you, and I really appreciate it. It made this feel like I was able to put a lot of different elements in here that helped it become the product that it is in the end. So we've moved on to eligibility, and I'm just going to note it here in blue, you can see this says page 16. So that's referring to that respite voucher guidebook that we talked about. So if you were to want some additional information for reference, that's how that can be used. So we'll move on down. And I can't see the chat. So if somebody has said something and you have any questions as I'm going through this, feel free to just interrupt me, and I won't take it personally, and I'm happy to answer questions. But the next category after we go through eligibility, we have enrollment processes, and then we have information and assistance. And so we have the various categories. And then in the end, the really big one it's complex, and it's important to look at each of these steps is all the financial considerations. So the tax and labor perspectives. And there's two different approaches. So we have, staying up to date. And then in the end, there's some classification, suggested hints, ways to look at information, and the tips kind of break down the various items. In this category, we've bolded certain items just to help you decide just your eyes, because it is a little bit more dense. So if you're looking for SUDA or FUDA or FICA, it just kind of pops right out. Then in the end, we have all the important quality and risk management items. And that brings us to the very bottom of the tool. So I'd love it if anyone has any questions, if you've been, is anyone using the tool so far?
Laura, this is Tracy, and there's a lot of comments in the chat saying great guide from Lisa. I've already been able to recommend it, says Cheryl. And Lynn says, great tool, thank you. I've shared it already too. So there's a lot of comments. Congrats, Laura, and those who gave feedback. This is a true tool with moving parts, even from Barb.
Oh, thanks.
Is anyone else out there using it yet or considering using it?
And if you aren't using it, and there's a specific reason why, or you might have questions about it that I could resolve, feel free to speak up and I'm happy to kind of go through that.
I know, I understand, Laura, that New York State has now decided to use this tool in their area agency on aging expansion of their voucher program. And I think, you've been working with them on that too.
Yeah, well, that's what they told me, that they decided they liked this tool. And so they were going to use it for their program.
So we hope that New York, they were planning to come back to the next voucher learning collaborative and tell us how it's going. And they have so many new area agencies on aging that are considering voucher programs. So it's especially timely for their network. And I think we'll get some very good feedback from that effort.
Yeah, my understanding was,
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Oh, my understanding was they were going to kind of tweak it to make it program specific and then distribute it. So I'd be interested, has anybody else considered that? So if because this is done at a national level, there's going to be some state specific information that you could add and then use in your various area agencies on aging. That's almost as hard for me to say as FICA refunds. But I'm wondering, has anybody tried customizing this for your own programs?
And that is a beautiful advantage of this tool, that it is customizable. We do have one question from Lisa, and please feel free to unmute yourselves and ask your questions too. But Lisa is asking if people are serving persons on an emergency basis. Oh, that's not totally related to this discussion right now, but people who are serving people on an emergency basis who are also homeless. We can maybe table that for another discussion. Or if you want to respond to Lisa privately in the chat. And Cheryl is saying that she is promoting it among state agencies that fund respite vouchers so that they can use it to encourage more providers. So that's
great.
wonderful. I mean, this could be a tool to encourage the development of new programs. So thank you for raising that, Cheryl. Any other questions?
Oh, sorry, Jill, I didn't mean to step over. This is Tracy in Lifespan Respite Washington. And so I have replaced the readiness label, right, which is fantastic. It totally fits for what this is. And so I think we're curious, fingers crossed, new grant, we can run through, this is what we have, what do we want to do with the new grant, and kind of use it for continuous assessment and strategy planning, from that realm. So that's how we're kind of like toying with the idea of like, hey, we don't have to build anything. We could just use Laura's tool and modify it, like you said. We just haven't done it yet. We just have the idea bubble.
Oh, that's exciting, Tracy. Thanks for sharing that.
Yeah, that's a very creative way to use the tool. I think that's great. Anyone else have any comments or questions related to the tool? Well, thank you so much, Laura. And I'm sure after we hang up and we have other questions that come in, if it will be okay if we needed to run those by you.
Oh, absolutely. I'm happy to assist with anything that comes up. So feel free to reach out.
Thank you so much. We'll make sure everyone has your contact information too.
Okay. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. If you can stop sharing your screen, I'll be able to share mine back.
Okay.
Thank you again, Laura.
All right.
More than welcome to stay if you want, but I know you have other things to do too.
I might, if I could stay, I might stay for the presentation piece, if that's all right, if that would
Oh,
that be
absolutely. No, that would be wonderful.
okay, thanks.
Okay. So I am really delighted that we have our learning collaborative leader, Tracy Kahlo, who's agreed to present with her wonderful colleague, Barb Koumijian, today on the very important issue about equity and access to services. And I'm going to immediately just turn it over to them because they have a really wonderful presentation and discussion set up for you all.
Thanks, Jill. This is Tracy.
Thanks.
So while she's graciously doing our slides today so they don't take over my screens, and Barb and I can continue facilitating this wonderful time we have ahead. So as stated, I am in Washington State. I have light brown hair below my shoulders, blue eyes. I wear reading glasses, and I am an East Coast transplant, so I could be known to talk fast. So by all means, just, slow it down. Barb and I are very conversational. We are delighted with questions, hands raised, whatever it is happening. We will be going into breakout rooms pretty quickly in the beginning of our session. I'll turn it over to Barb.
Welcome, everyone. I'm so glad to be here. Sorry, I'm a little hoarse. The previously mentioned wildfire smoke has been kind of nasty. Welcome to our presentation. We're going to be sharing some of our own learning today, and we're going to be giving you lots of opportunities to be learning with one another and thinking about things on your own. I could not resist the visual pun here of lessons from the field, and we're all in the field. So if Jill will kindly move to the next slide, we'll talk about what you can expect out of the presentation. You will, as I just described, have a chance to explore with everyone on the call here, how to intentionally assure equitable access to respite services in your community or state. You're going to get a chance to share what works, what you've tried, and give your suggestions in our interactive sessions. And you can generate suggestions, especially the kind that just pop out at you. Sometimes we're struck by inspiration. We are going to move through the presentation for pretty much the whole remainder of the session. There'll probably be about 10 minutes or so at the end, in which, if we haven't previously thought of something, we can bring things up at that point. But there are going to be ample opportunities, as Tracy mentioned, for us to ask questions, put things in the chat, and as it strikes you, please raise it. It's horrible to have to wait a long time and then figure out what you meant to say. So we're going to move to the next slide. Equitable access to caregiver services. These are some ideas that we've experienced at Lifespan Respite Washington for increasing access to our programs in a way that raises equity and makes things more equitable. We've had experience changing how services and supports are offered, the way in which they're offered, using an internal process, we call it a tool, to promote access to services, and using funding for novel approaches to expand caregiver services and supports, where in this last case, equity was centered from the beginning. The next slide, please. And before diving in, we're going to now move into breakout rooms. And we're going to have about 15 minutes in the breakout rooms to discuss 2 questions, which will be on the next slide. And Tracy and I there'll be 2 breakout rooms. Each room will be discussing all the questions. So we have 2 questions. Each group will discuss both questions. Tracy and I will be one of us in each group, not so much to facilitate, but to be able to remind you what the questions were and just to be there if something needs to be elucidated. We're also going to be arranging things so that we will push a record button when the breakout room starts in order that we can capture the information that happens during the breakout sessions. So at this point, I am
Would
going.
you, I'm sorry, I don't mean to
Go
interrupt.
ahead,
Would you
Jill.
prefer that I do 3 breakout rooms and then everyone might have a chance to?
That's where I was calling an audible, 3 to 4 breakout rooms due to the number and not assigning co-hosts, and then we can go in and out of them. How's that?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. we'll
If
do 3.
somebody,
I'm
as
ready to
long
hit
as some,
4 breakout rooms.
as long as somebody in each of the breakout rooms is willing to press the record button. So
We'll
that
stick to 3.
okay.
Welcome back, everyone. Thank you ever so much. I know there's some technical difficulties happening, and I will just make a comment, and I'm going to have a couple minutes to reflect out from our small groups, any reflections, any things that we heard, because of course there's so much wisdom in our circle, right? Our entire network is so profoundly wise and has so much rich experience. So we're on slide 5, Jill, but we don't have to hit it right now. We can just stay in the large group and talk. I'm going to look around and see if Hannah's internet, okay, brought her back. So in group 3, she was talking about an employer initiative and there was a cliffhanger. Something happened on IT. She vanished from our room. So Hannah, would you be willing to unmute and just finish what you were saying about the employer engagement in Nebraska? If you can hear me. Thank you.
Yes, absolutely. Sorry about that. I don't know what happened. No, I was just sharing that in Nebraska, we have the Employer Engagement Initiative, and we have a specific coordinator for that initiative that reaches out to employers across the state, not only to provide respite resources to them to share with their employees, but also to be able to come and do a presentation and specifically share that information with people that are working caregivers. And with that, we also utilize what we call the working caregiver survey. And that survey provides information to the employer as well as our employer engagement initiative on how many people identify as a working caregiver and how many people are providing ongoing care, and specifically maybe in that sandwich generation of providing care for a parent and a child. So that's something that we are able to do in Nebraska, is collect that data and then see kind of where we need to gear our outreach and more resources for specific age groups, or as well as just across the state.
Thank you so much. That is excellent. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
I'm sure we're going to be following up because I have more questions, but trying to contain my thoughts and curiosity again of how we all learn from each other. It's really exciting. Barb and Jill, I know you were in 2 other groups. Is there folks to step forward from that group or to share? I know that Sarah is sharing a link in the chat about improving Hispanic family caregiver projects. Thank you so much, Sarah, for this link on identifying unique barriers and cultural values influencing service utilization and caregiver roles. So that's fantastic. Another wonderful resource that we can all help with our programs and learn and grow together. Anything else? Barb, you're muted. It's all good.
We had a few folks that didn't really get a chance to speak up. Leslie, okay. Leslie hasn't had a chance if she wants to, or Dana, if you had something to share, we're all ears.
This is Leslie. I don't really have much to share one way or the other. I think one of our bigger barriers is that we are co-located with long-term services and supports. And at some point in the past, somebody wanted to kind of press the easy button and make like lifespan respite and caregiver look exactly the same as waiver services. And so trying to break free of that. Unfortunately, though, a lot of stuff is written in administrative rules, so it's not just like an easy, hey, policy fix kind of thing. So trying to, because we really want to meet caregivers where they're at, but we're very much limited in how we can right now. So trying to change those rules is a big issue.
Yeah, those are the guiding systems, right? With those are all part of the big changes and adaptions that we, of course, are all making in real time. So thank you for sharing that. That's a big one to handle, and I'm glad you all are tackling it. Yeah, I hear you, and that is a big one for sure. Any other thoughts to call out? I don't know if Mary from group 3, Stephanie or Catherine wanted to. I haven't actually reflected some of the thoughts there, but they had great ones to share as well. And if any one of them wanted to unmute, we have like a minute or two more just to hear a few more ideas, and Barb and I'll move back into the presentation. Well, we're in it. This is part of our good chat. Thanks, Catherine.
Yeah, this is Catherine from the Arizona Caregiver Coalition. So I shared in our group that recently we contracted with a marketing company to put in 3 advertisements at 3 different hospital locations in Arizona in waiting rooms. And we've definitely seen an uptake in our applications since we put in those ads, and we're actually in our intake forms asking individuals, how did you hear about us? And we have that as one of the categories. So we are seeing some more people who maybe are in the emergency waiting room or general hospital waiting room, seeing our ads and starting to actually enroll in our programs. So that's been pretty exciting. And we also were fortunate enough to hire an outreach coordinator under a different grant back in 2022. However, she has really worked to help us expand with the lifespan respite options, translate everything to Spanish. She is a native Spanish speaker and bilingual. So we were able to do our translations in-house and start building partnerships with local organizations that serve the Hispanic and Latino populations.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Barb, do you want to resume?
Let us resume. Jill?
Thank you all very much. Mary, Miss Mary, I'm going to steal hers and say it out loud, and it's fine that she didn't want to. But if she changes her mind, she can always say it herself. But she gave the AAA's targeted are out there helping with equity and sharing. So wanted to give a shout out to our AAA partners, because partners is another, very valuable part of the puzzle. All right, Miss Barb.
All right. Well, we're going to talk about an ongoing experience that we're having over at Lifespan Respite Washington. It's been a long-term dream goal for, especially for our partners at ALSA, who are here on the call today, Roz and Dana, and to start a statewide caregiver support group. And this rose up definitely during the pandemic era, when we were all scrambling around for ways to be able to serve our folks. And we got the opportunity when the TBI, it was the TBI Council, right, Tracy? Offered to,
Correct.
offered us a hosting platform, the same one they used, and the use of their professional facilitators, which I think was just great, but with our own group to promote, anybody could call in. It was free, it was online, and they provided the platform and the facilitator and most of the topics, and our job was outreach. And we did a lot of that. We used social media. We used our voucher applicant database of people who've contacted us. And if they were currently active on the list, waiting for a voucher, using a voucher, have used a voucher, but we're still in there, we sent them out email blasts telling them about the group. And the program ran monthly for a pilot period. It looked really good. And, you know, people were coming, and then suddenly, or well, maybe not suddenly, month by month, we saw a tailing off. And the attendance dropped, and we looked at all the variables that could be affecting why people were not attending. Anyway.
You want the next slide?
Last slide, yes. We had a bit of an awakening. If you look at these 2 points on the slide, the first is one of our on your left-hand side face, as you face it, the caregiver support group. That's an Instagram post for the group. And if you look at the time that the session is offered, this is the first thing that kind of hit us up in the face. 6 to 7 p.m. Quite a few people are eating then. And we thought that that might really have something to do with it. Then the next thing was the ability to easily access the hosting platform. It's actually rather involved. And we had to post a video and give verbal, text instructions on our website. We had to sort of send that out every single time. And we said, you know what? This is a barrier. Too many clicks, too many steps in the process is a barrier for caregivers who are already stressed for time and mental bandwidth. This is maybe one of the reasons why it's not working. So next slide. We did an open dialogue with our partners, with ALTSA, with the TBI Council folks. And we said, hey, have you considered this is what we're observing. So the platform is still the same, but the steps, we were able to get resources that made the steps a lot easier to follow. And then we were, the facilitator was able to do a change in time, and the program is now offered between 4 and 5 Pacific time. And it's actually on, not like during the week, but it's on Friday evening or late afternoon, 4 to 5. And things are going fairly well, I think. So that is the good news. And that is an instance of equity. We're not only looking at cultural and ethnic and linguistic communities, we're also looking at the population in general that we're talking about, which is caregivers. What are caregiver barriers? What can we be sensitive to when we're creating programming? In this case, we were lucky that things were able to get moved. It would have been good if we'd kind of realized that at the beginning, but no one is perfect. And so we considered that it was like almost an oops, but it turned out okay. And then if we move on to the next slide, Tracy's going to tell us a bit about the cool way, at least I think it's cool, but I'm kind of a data nerd. We managed to gain equity of access to our voucher program. Trace?
Yes. So tagging in on the geographic equity in order to assure that we don't have inequity. Washington State, for those that, all of our states have all the kinds of barriers, geographic considerations that we all take into consideration when we're delivering our services and our support to our caregivers. So in Washington State, there's a huge Cascade Mountain range that divides the western side and the eastern side. And so that also does the same thing for our populations. Just like all of us, we have rural places, we have hard to reach. We also have the inequity that I think COVID really pushed front and center on access and the availability of bandwidth and internet and all of those things. And so we have a very program dense that requires someone accessing the internet to apply, right? And they can mail that. All of our applications prior to 2018 used to be mailed, and yet now they're all submitted online. So in this equity, we just took a look, a strong look. We also compared our census data for the state of Washington. You can do that by counties, but we were really looking, so it's a twofold way. We made sure that we had equity in the applications and the awards, as well as how can we reach folks that align with our census. So on the equity for the applications, we actually award and divide our state into 3 parts. When we have X amount of dollars to award, we will sort by Eastern applications. We will sort by Western applications. So we divide our counties. And then inside the Western region, there are 3 predominant counties that could use all the vouchers without anybody else ever applying, which is King County, Snohomish, and Pierce. So those 3, kind of red and the 2 orange top and bottom. We then look at all the applications from those 3 counties and do the awards. So again, that's how we are looking at that equity and how we're going to assure that it's fair across the state for everyone to have equal access to awards. Next slide. Thanks, Ms. Jill. So that's just kind of recapping what I shared about the distribution, ensuring, and then the support. The other dynamic area is that our folks, you know, again, going back to tools and we're meeting our caregivers where they're at, sometimes doing the research, figuring out which respite provider to use. Again, in Washington State, we have registered respite providers. So we also make sure that folks have access to that, and we walk them through. So the next slide, we'll go a little bit more into that. So on our Lifespan Respite Washington website is our searchable database, which we also share out to providers that may not be applying to us or caregivers that are not applying to us, because it has a very rich number of resources for them. So they can hit that big blue button that says find respite. It then opens up this searchable database, which really allows them to find their own self-directed resources. And in awarding, we sometimes do the research and say, based on the fact that you asked for home care, here are some providers in your county. But we know that our caregivers could live on a border or are happy to drive a couple of hours into another county for the respite that they would like to receive. And so they can be as creative as possible. We do not ask anybody to take their entire voucher award, and our vouchers are about $1,100. And with $100 going back to the respite provider for intake, and then $1,000 to be used by the caregiver. They could purchase camp for $500 and use the rest of the remaining $500 on their award towards in-home care. So they really can do a variety, and they can start with one and then say, oh, that was good enough, and now I'm going to switch to something else. So again, we really work, Barb and Colleen do a phenomenal job of working with our caregivers, helping them and walking with them as they use their voucher. Next slide. So this is just our intentional slide. Take a pause. We've heard a lot in our small groups. We're hearing a lot through this, and I'm sure that we're all looking and thinking about our own programs and assessing what we're doing and where we might want to go, or things that we hope to do differently. You know, changing systems, as was shared, is really difficult. Sometimes our partners, it's a lot of education. So this is our intentional pause for quiet, to allow our brains to breathe. And then we're into our last pieces of some tools, then ways and services that we use to try to expand the equity in the lifespan respite. Next slide, Ms. Jill. So the last area with ACL's assistance was mini tech grants. And this was our intentional place when we did the census research. So again, as Barb said, we're self-professed data nerds. We love to see the data that we've built and how our applicants and our caregivers tell us more. So on this front, we wanted to have intentional relationships. And in doing so, especially in COVID, everyone was being super creative of how could you be present with each other virtually. So that meant people had to grow fast, buy technology, reinforce their technology, expand other tools. So we wanted to do this with the intentionality of extending our relationships with partners across the state that are doing work with caregivers, but they may not be in the respite side of the world. So this was one way that we are awarding those organizations, and then hopefully we're building our partnership. We're establishing relationships with each other to also widen. And I know in our small group, we talked quite a bit about how that outreach is a perpetual process. And we use all the tools we can think of and move forward. And on that, next slide, back to Barb.
So when we went to find organizations that would be able to use our grants, we did months and months of social media campaigning and also direct contact with organizations that seemed like they might be a good fit. But, you know, there are tons and tons of, you know, community-based nonprofits out there, folks. And the nice thing is we actually did get some pretty decent responses to our social media plunge. And this is just an example there. The picture is an example of one of the social media tiles we used. Dollar signs often catch people's eyes, I'll tell you. And we got people responding to, you know, there was an actual dedicated page on the website and people could apply there. They could fill out the application form. There was a place where they could, you know, email us and ask questions and, you know, find out about the technicalities of how the grant was going to operate. But the basic line is grants. You can use the grants to purchase technology that supports your service to culturally, economically, and linguistically diverse family caregivers. And that was the bottom line. That was our central qualification for receiving a grant from this program. And the proposals were really cool and interesting. And I've listed them here, but Zoom subscriptions for online parent training for Spanish-speaking families that are involved with dependency, child welfare, the justice system. I was like, wow, that's, you know, very meaty. And then remotely located Latino family caregivers, get them Wi-Fi hotspot boosters and cell phone service packages. Additional laptop for virtual migrant community support group and parenting classes. This agency had such modest ask. This is all they wanted was one more laptop. Volunteer management software. That's a good one for a hospice caregiver support organization serving a very diverse population and community. And again, virtual family support groups for medically fragile children in a rural and remote area. And I can tell you the pandemic caused some very interesting, I remember this wasn't directly related to the mini grants, but we had people trying to get vouchers who were driving 10 miles into town and sitting in front of the school or the fire department with their cell phone, and they were like, you know, help. And it was very challenging. But these groups were, you know, and this is, I think we have 11 groups that have completed the entire process at this point, correct, Tracy, or maybe more. And so the great ideas have just proliferated. And because we designed it that this program had to support advancing equity, it is doing that. We're very, very happy about that. So next slide, please. Thank you, Jill. So at this point, we're kind of finished talking about us, unless you have specific questions about one of our programs. But what we wanted to highlight, and this is just a recap, is when you think about advancing equity, especially equity and access to services, are there systems that can help your program? Are there partners that can lean in? Can you flip over, change, alter the way you offer services? Sometimes a subtle change, for example, change the hour at which you're offering a program, can make all the difference. Are you using any tools, or can some tools be repurposed to enhance equity and inclusion of your program? For example, the tool that Laura just shared today, you know, and PAVE is planning to, Lifespan Respite PAVE is planning to use it as an ongoing tool to assess equity. Now, I'll tell you that one of the tools that we use, we think of our database as a tool, and I strongly suggest that you consider your data collection a very strong tool to show where there are equity gaps and to broadly consider what is an equity gap. And that's, you know, that's our 2 cents, which I think is worth more than that. But if you are doing a process or using something like a database and you've never considered it a tool, try switching your perspective and say, how can I use this to accomplish something else? So next slide. Oh, wait. We
I'm
have
gonna
something for
stop
you.
the share, Barb, and just put it on my screen and do the tool, our equity tools.
Right, we have something for you.
Yes. So
Some things, several things.
So we will share these with the fabulous Jill, who can share these out with everyone, or we'll leave it to her discretion. We can also I'll drop the links in the chat. But there are 3 tools, again, you know, just for your enjoyment, if it's useful, if it helps you organize your thoughts or look at it. There's an equity impact assessment sheet that we have, you know, have come in contact with some other work. It's civil rights, dohwa.gov. So bottom line, you could just go through this, look at which parts of this that help you to discern where you want to go, what is happening, and which communities may be effective, which other communities or external groups might be effective. So one tool is more of an assessment. You use what you like about it, don't use it at all. We're not here to say one over the other. Minnesota, the Department of Human Services has an equity analysis tool. They define it as the continuing care for older adults administration, so is committed to using an equity lens in the creation, execution, and evaluation of programs, projects, initiatives, budgets, practices, and procedures. So it's all inclusive. And then they tie back to their DSHS equity policy. And I think most of our states, in all of the big systems that wrap and surround and are applicable to our programs, have equity policies. So aligning, looking at those, expanding from there. So this one does a lot more on glossary. That might be helpful in how we're all looking at it. Then they move into an equity analysis tool. Again, this is one to create some thoughts, create some planning, anything that sparks that. And our last tool on the University of Washington Medicine Equity Impact Tool worksheet is, again, has some additional things that are a little different than the other ones, talking about decision makers, analysis and decision process. So again, you know, these equity tools are not prescriptive. They don't have to be used. It's just, we wanted to offer things that, you know, at times spark our thoughts. And then of course, in Jill's most recent June phenomenal email to us all, there's a lot. It was a fully loaded, yet again, June, Caregiver in America, the 24/7. So she has a lot of great resources in there. Understanding disabilities in American Indian and Alaska Native communities. Here's another fantastic toolkit and guide. And then working daughters in the workplace. This is the first I've ever like really like seen that and really appreciated. So again, our own network with Jill, you know, pushing out some fantastic things that help us to think through all of those equities lens that we have in our state and our programs and our how we're supporting all of that. So I'm going to stop sharing. And I think as Barb indicated, we're at the end. We're open to questions, thoughts. We're back to you, Jill, to take us through or away or give back time at 20 minutes till. Thank you all. We appreciate you being here.
Thank you.
Thank you both for a really fantastic presentation. I really so appreciated your framework about thinking so much more broadly about what do we mean by equity access. And I know for me, it was especially eye-opening. And I love all those tools. Thank you for sharing those. I'm really eager to look at all of those more closely. But again, you know, we do have to think even more broadly beyond cultural and ethnic diversity, about geographical diversity, time diversity. There are just so many ways that we need to ensure equity. So thank you for raising all of those issues. Anyone else who would like to ask a question of our wonderful presenters or share any resources you may have? Be sure you send me all those links, Tracy, because I know they're to the equity tools, because
Absolutely.
I'd like to set up a whole new web page on Arch about equity access. I'm thinking broadly about that. I just love that whole concept.
See, Jill, this is what happens when you get this like really cool and usable website, you know, set up. And it's like, I can do this and
I can do things now.
Ah, yes, we've created another website nerd in the universe. That's one of my jobs at LRW is I constantly look for resources to post and stuff.
Any questions? Any thoughts? Anyone who maybe didn't get a chance to speak in the smaller breakout that would like to share something now? I know we didn't have a chance to get to everyone in our group.
Yeah.
Though we shared some wonderful resources around reaching African American and Hispanic populations. That seemed to be the focus in our group, and we've had some states that have accomplished a lot already, and some states that are planning to do even more. So it was nice to hear about their plans for the future with their new grant proposals as well.
Ooh.
Hey, Jill, this is Catherine in Arizona. So I just kind of have a general question for the group. So in Arizona, we have a fairly large tribal community here. I think we have over 23 tribal nations just in Arizona alone, and that is going to be a big focus of our next year, is trying to engage more with the tribal nations and build relationships and get more engagement in our respite programs. And I was just wondering if, hold on, sorry, I have an executive assistant with me that doesn't know when to keep quiet. But I was wondering if anyone has any advice on building engagement and outreach to the tribal nations.
We do have a lot of expertise in this group on that.
We do, and I don't mean to call on our people. I'm looking really quickly. Dana and Roz from Washington State. That's part of.
Oops, I was trying to put my video on too, sorry. I'd be happy to talk about that. You know, if you wanted to reach out. I've also worked with our tribes quite extensively in our kinship program. So a lot of it comes from pre-existing relationships we have an Office of Indian Policy at ALSA that we work with tribes in, you know, all the tribal governances of the tribes in Washington State, so that we already have contacts and connections and working relationships. So it's a good place to start with, you know, if you already have some of those infrastructures built where you can tap into those relationships is really helpful. Face-to-face is always hands down the best way I have found to build those relationships. And just having a better understanding of how to work within the tribal governances that exist, because they are each one different and unique, and one size never fits all. And just understanding that, I think, is very helpful as well. But I'd be happy to connect and be a resource if you want to do some brainstorming.
Also, I
Yeah,
wanted
that
to
would be great.
Also, I wanted to add that, our state Aging and Long-Term Support Administration and the Office of Indian Policy has set up 2 tribal summits every year. And those are a really great opportunity to see a lot of people from different tribes around the state. And then you can, as you present, people will come up to you and want to talk more about it, or you can just start to go over to people and talk to them about their programs. It's a really great opportunity to build some trusting relationships.
Thank you, Dana and Roz. And Catherine, I know that in Arizona, you have the Office on Tribal Relations, and up here in Washington, we have about 29 federally. So it's been a constant, and Dana and Roz go back before we had the contract with Lifespan Respite as far as their knowledge in the state. And again, it's hearing and listening, that key piece of how would they like to support their caregivers? How would they like to think about that? And so there's some training programs going on here too, to expand that. And again, it's that engagement and involvement, right? Not presuming, but absolutely, how would you like to care for your people? And so having lived in Arizona, I know it's a very rich and very huge state. So you've got the geographic challenges similar to ours as well, with just huge expanse of a state. So please keep in touch with us. I think you can hear Dana and Roz are fantastic at what they do. So they'll have fabulous ideas.
I know Cheryl from Nevada is also on the call, and they've done quite a bit reaching out to the tribal communities. I don't know if you have anything you want to add right now, Cheryl, but she's another great resource. Montana, I don't know if anyone from Montana is on the call today, but they've also, especially around their Lifespan Respite grant activities, have done a lot of outreach with their tribal communities. So that's another state. And if we have some resources on the website, I will try to identify those for you, Catherine, and shoot them your way. Well, I'll shoot them to the whole group once I've identified what we have already.
Hi, it's Lisa from Wisconsin. There are such things as dumb questions, and I'm going to ask one right now. But do most of you agree that when we're talking about equity and inclusion, that are we looking at the underserved populations that were identified in the national strategy? And is that who we're talking about? Or, because we have been doing a lot of work in regards to grandparents or relatives as caregivers, the LGBTQ area, kinship care. So I was curious, when we're talking about equity and inclusion, we've talked about tribes, Hispanic, we've talked ethnicities, but are we also talking about underserved populations as well?
I think that Tracy and Barb really made that case clear, that their framework for talking about equity is very broad. So I think referring back to the national strategy, Lisa, is really great, because that is exactly, from my perspective, I think absolutely trying to reach out to all of the underserved populations. Absolutely.
True. Yes.
And thinking broadly about who that includes.
And even the national strategy, which is where I love to dive and look through, I look at my background is in universal design for learning, and this the idea is that you throw the net as wide as possible to include as many folks of all types, ages, sizes, genders, whatever, as possible. There is the only, you know, perhaps whatever you're producing is going to limit you, but it's a real brain stretcher, because we're used to looking at things from a, you know, I would like to reach this population, or I would like to reach this population. And it's true that each population, with all their specificities, you know, you have to kind of like drill down and think about that. But when you're considering your program as a whole, I think it's awesome to be able to say, you know, just where can we set the boundaries here? Do we need to have boundaries? You know, life sets boundaries, but our brains can go ahead and throw the field wide open. And that leads to some pretty interesting possibilities. That's very philosophical. It's not a tool, but.
One thing that I've learned over my career here is that, you know, understanding underserved populations and different populations of people is just understanding their historical trauma, what makes them, you know, what their culture is like. And I started just trying to find, you know, national webinars and things that have like LGBTQ plus. Or yesterday, there was a webinar on diversity and inclusion, and they were talking about how data and research has is looked at by Indigenous people, and that was one I didn't know very much about that, so that was fascinating. How yeah, there's always some new great things to learn, and it just really helps you when you're going to, you know, be working with people in different populations and different cultures than you grew up in, to just kind of understand where they're coming from.
So hopefully we all agree there's never any dumb questions at all. At all. It helps stretch us all, and we're all in a continuous learning and improving. So I think it's all of the above that you stated, you know, for sure. And we also wanted to make sure there was equity in how we're making awards, and where are the populations across the state, and how are we reaching in those communities? Who do we have as partners and collaborators that can do that and build trust? Like, what is this thing, Lifespan? What do you mean I'm going to have to let some person I don't know into my home? All the things that we all already struggle with all the time, you know, in encouraging a break, right? That's like baseline of the things that we have to like work with caregivers, because there's a lot of us that can't actually believe someone can take care of my loved one the way I take care of them. Well, they know everything, and how am I going to mind meld so that they will do that well, right? All those things that run through everyone's mind. So thank you for that solid question. Really appreciate it. I think we can give people back time, Jill, unless you have step back.
I have no further questions or comments. If no one else does, I want to thank our wonderful presenters again for really eye-opening presentation and getting us to think more broadly about equity, inclusion, and reaching populations that we want to reach. So thank you all very much for your afternoon, and we will let you know when our next voucher call will be, probably in September. But have a wonderful summer, and we'll see you at hopefully our Learning Collaborative next week on implementing the national strategy. Thank you all so much, and have a great afternoon. Thank you.
Thanks, Jill.